I can't say that I can resolve a situation or a beef with somebody that I can't stand this nigga. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it's not this ain't WWF. It's not like I just got rap beef with this nigga. I don't like this little nigga.
I know what it feels like to have nothing, all right? And I had to rebuild my life over with $600-700 a month.
He's been trained to believe what you seen him say in that interview when I said that he's entitled. Really, it's his mom's entitlement that's been filtered.
For nearly 2 decades, 50 Cent played the long game. While the industry laughed off his jokes and brushed aside his warnings, Curtis Jackson was quietly stacking receipts, watching patterns repeat, and letting time do what it does best: expose everything. Now, as lawsuits pile up, documentaries resurface, and insiders suddenly remember what they once ignored. It feels less like coincidence and more like confirmation. 50 didn't rush. He didn't need to. He waited, from subtle interviews to savage social media posts. 50 Cent has been telling the same story for 20 years. Power protects itself until it can't anymore. Back when Diddy was untouchable award shows, billion-dollar deals. Industry loyalty 50 was labeled bitter, obsessed, or clout-chasing. But history has a way of changing the tone. What once sounded like trolling now reads like foreshadowing. This isn't about one viral moment. It's about patience, survival, and revenge served cold. As the walls close in and the public finally asks the questions 50 asked years ago, one thing is clear: this wasn't impulsive beef. This was strategy. And if 50 Cent is smiling now, it's because he knew the ending long before the rest of the world caught up. To understand why people say 50 Cent waited 20 years to destroy Diddy, you have to go back to the early 2000s, before the lawsuits, before the documentaries, before social media turned whispers into worldwide headlines. Back then, the music industry was ruled by untouchable moguls. And Sean Diddy Combs sat comfortably at the top of that food chain. He wasn't just an artist or producer. He was the gatekeeper. Deals, radio play, award shows, brand partnerships. Die's influence stretched everywhere. And in that era, nobody challenged power without paying a price. Nobody. Except maybe Curtis Jackson, when 50 Cent exploded onto the scene with Get Rich or Die Trying. He wasn't the typical industry newcomer. He came in battle-tested, street-hardened, and deeply suspicious of music executives. Unlike many artists who are eager to be embraced by the elite, 50 moved like someone who already knew how the game ended. He watched who survived. He watched who disappeared. And most importantly, he watched who got protected no matter what rumors followed them. From the outside, 50's tension with Diddy looked like regular rap beef, sarcastic comments, slick interviews, and occasional trolling. But under the surface, it was always something deeper. 50 never framed Diddy as just a rival. He framed him as a symbol: unchecked power, industry silence, and people afraid to speak because their careers depended on it early on. When 50 hinted that something wasn't right with Diddy's inner circle, the industry laughed it off. Bloggers called him obsessed. Executives dismissed him as reckless. Fans saw it as entertainment. And maybe that was the point. By hiding serious accusations behind humor, 50 avoided becoming the headline while still planting the seed. He wasn't trying to convince people overnight. He was trying to make sure that when the truth finally surfaced, nobody could say they'd never heard it before. This was the beginning of the long game. While Diddy expanded his empire bad boy, fashion lines, alcohol brands, television deals, 50 did something different. He diversified quietly. Music, movies, television, business ventures. He built financial independence, which in the entertainment industry is the real shield. Because once you don't need the system, you can speak about the system. That freedom mattered. It meant that when others stayed silent to protect opportunities, 50 could afford to laugh, joke, and point fingers without worrying about being blackballed. And yet, even with that freedom, he didn't go all in. Not yet. Instead, 50 watched time do its work. He saw how rumors followed Diddy for years, but never stuck. How settlements were made quietly. how stories died before reaching mainstream attention. He saw how the same media outlets that celebrate moguls are often the last ones willing to investigate them. And he understood something crucial. Power doesn't collapse from one accusation. It collapses when patterns become impossible to ignore. That's why 50 never framed his criticism as a single event. He framed it as a history dot. Over the years, his comments became sharper, more confident, and more specific. He didn't need to shout because the internet never forgets. Old interviews resurfaced. Old jokes took on new meaning. Clips people once laughed at started circulating again, this time with different energy. Suddenly, the audience wasn't asking, "Why is 50 obsessed?" They were asking, "Why was he saying this so early?" When lawsuits and public allegations against Diddy finally began to stack up, the narrative shifted overnight. The industry that once defended him went quiet. The same silence 50 had pointed out for years became visible to everyone. Executives avoided comment. Artists distanced themselves. Media coverage exploded not because the rumors were new, but because it was finally safe to talk. That's when 50 stepped back into the spotlight, not as an accuser, but as a commentator. He didn't say, "I told you so," directly. He didn't need to. His social media posts, interviews, and carefully timed reactions did that for him. Each post felt casual, but the timing was surgical. Each joke landed harder because reality was now backing it up. This is where the idea of waiting 20 years really matters. 50 Cent didn't destroy Diddy with a diss track, a lawsuit, or a viral expose. He let Diddy's own history do the damage. He simply made sure the audience was paying attention when the cracks finally showed. In a culture obsessed with instant reactions, 50 moved like someone who understood patience as a weapon. There's also something darker. Beneath the strategy, survival. 50 comes from a world where speaking too early can cost you everything. He watched artists lose deals, credibility, and protection for crossing the wrong people. He knew that if he pushed too hard before the moment was right, he'd be framed as unstable, jealous, or malicious. So instead, he waited until the public mood shifted, until society was more willing to believe victims, question institutions, and re-examine powerful figures. When that shift happened, 50 didn't have to change his story. The world changed around it. What makes this moment so unsettling is that it forces a larger question. How many people knew and how many chose silence? 50's comments over the years now feel less like provocation and more like documentation. He wasn't collecting evidence in a legal sense, he was collecting memory. And memory, when shared at the right time, becomes narrative. Part 1 of this story isn't about Diddy's downfall yet. It's about understanding the environment that allowed someone like 50 Cent to wait instead of act. It's about power, fear, and the cost of speaking too soon. Because before the collapse, before the headlines, before the public reckoning, there was a man standing on the sidelines, watching, joking, warning, and refusing to forget. And in the next part, the question won't be whether 50 Cent knew something was coming, but how carefully he positioned himself to survive it when it did. If part 1 was about patience, part 2 is about timing. Because waiting alone isn't enough. You have to know when the ground is soft enough for the truth to finally break through. For 50 Cent, that moment didn't come from one explosive revelation. It came from a shift in culture, media, and power itself. For years, Diddy's biggest defense wasn't denial, it was influence. In the old industry model, moguls didn't need to respond to rumors because their silence was backed by networks of lawyers, executives, and media allies. Stories disappeared. Accusers were questioned instead of protected. And the public, conditioned to separate art from accountability, moved on quickly. 50 Cent saw that system clearly. More importantly, he saw when it began to weaken. The rise of social media changed everything. Control over narratives slowly slipped from boardrooms into the hands of audiences. Old interviews could be replayed. Screenshots live forever. Clips that once aired once and vanished could now resurface years later with millions of views. This was the environment 50 had been waiting for, a place where memory mattered more than access. As this shift happened, 50 adjusted his approach. He didn't suddenly become louder. He became sharper. His posts were brief, often sarcastic, sometimes cruel, but always perfectly timed. He never led with allegations. Instead, he reacted. And reaction in moments of crisis carries more weight than accusation. It positions you as someone observing the truth unfold, not someone forcing it into existence. At the same time, the industry's silence grew louder. Artists who once praised Diddy avoided his name. Brands paused partnerships. Former associates suddenly found their voices, but carefully, selectively. This selective honesty is what 50 had mocked for years. Watching it happen in real time only validated his long-standing critique. The industry doesn't protect people. It protects power until protecting it becomes too expensive. When lawsuits and public allegations became impossible to ignore, the shield finally cracked. The media that once tiptoed around Diddy shifted its tone. Words like rumors turned into patterns. What had been framed as isolated incidents were now discussed as part of a larger, more disturbing picture. And in that moment, 50 didn't rush to center himself. He let history speak first. That restraint is key. 50 Cent understands spectacle. He built his career on it. So when he chooses not to dominate the conversation, it's intentional. By staying slightly on the edge commenting, but not leading, he avoided becoming the story. That meant critics couldn't dismiss the allegations as 50's beef. The focus stayed where it belonged, on Diddy and the system that enabled. Him. There's also a personal element to this timing. Over the years, 50 has openly talked about betrayal, manipulation, and survival. His distrust of industry figures didn't come from paranoia, it came from experience. He saw how loyalty was conditional and how quickly narratives could be flipped. Waiting wasn't just strategic, it was protective. He made sure that when the moment came, he couldn't be easily silenced, sued into submission, or erased. And when that moment finally arrived, the irony was brutal. The same jokes people once used to dismiss 50 became the very reason his words spread so fast. Humor had softened the audience, making them comfortable with ideas they once rejected. Now, with real-world consequences unfolding, those jokes felt less funny and more prophetic. This is where the idea of destroying Diddy needs to be understood differently. 50 Cent didn't dismantle Diddy's empire brick by brick. He didn't lead a crusade. He exposed the fragility of an image that relied on silence to survive. Once the silence broke, everything built on it began to wobble. Part 2 ends at the moment of impact, the point where waiting turns into witnessing. The protection is gone. The narrative has shifted. And the man who warned everyone years ago doesn't need to shout anymore. He just has to watch as the story he never forgot finally catches up to the world. In Part 3, the focus shifts again away from timing and toward consequences. Because once power loses its shield, the question isn't just who falls, but who else gets exposed when the lights come on. By the time the public fully digested the unfolding revelations, 50 Cent had already positioned himself as both observer and strategist. This wasn't a reaction, it was the culmination of 20 years of careful calculation, patience, and timing. Diddy's once impenetrable aura of invincibility had begun to crumble. And 50's role in that process was subtle but undeniable. He hadn't needed to attack directly. The combination of history, media, and social shifts had done most of the work for him. The aftermath is complex. For Diddy, it's a reckoning not just with public scrutiny, but with decades of decisions that now seem to be interpreted in a harsher light. Friends, collaborators, and partners are reconsidering their relationships. Contracts are reviewed. Past actions are re-examined. The very structures that once insulated him from accountability networks of influence, loyal allies, and media silence no longer guarantee protection. For 50 Cent, the result is affirmation. Years of being labeled obsessed or bitter are replaced with recognition of foresight. The public narrative has shifted in his favor, validating not just his suspicions, but his strategic approach. Social media amplifies every observation, turning prior jokes and comments into a chronicle of prescience. Every viral clip, every resurfaced interview, reinforces the idea that 50 wasn't reacting impulsively, he was recording, waiting, and knowing when the moment would come. This chapter also highlights the broader lesson about power in entertainment. Influence only lasts as long as the structures around it remain unquestioned. 50 Cent's approach demonstrates that patience and insight can outlast even the most entrenched power. It's a blueprint for survival and strategy in an industry defined by rapid change, fleeting loyalty, and public perception. Ultimately, the story isn't just about 50 Cent destroying. It's about the inevitability of truth when it's observed carefully and released at the right moment. 50's two-decade-long vigilance allowed him to capitalize on systemic weaknesses, ensuring that the reckoning wasn't just possible, but inevitable. And as the dust settles, one fact becomes clear. In the game of power, timing, memory, and strategy can matter far more than raw force. The world watched for 20 years, laughed along the way, and finally understood. 50 Cent didn't rush. He waited. And when the moment arrived, history and not hype delivered the final blow. The saga of 50 Cent vs. Diddy is more than just celebrity drama. It's a masterclass in patience, strategy, and understanding the power of timing. For fans, observers, and aspiring artists, there's a lesson here. In any game, whether it's music, business, or life itself, rushing rarely wins. True influence comes from understanding the system, watching patterns, and knowing when to act. If this story captivates you, there's a whole world of insight waiting to be explored. Dive deeper into 50 Cent's career. From his early struggles on the streets of Queens to his rise as a mogul in music, film, and business. Follow the ripple effects of his long game strategies and see how he turned patience into power. Engage with this content, share your thoughts. Join the conversation and examine how timing and persistence shape outcomes in the real world. For weekly updates on the latest celebrity exposes, industry shifts, and insider stories, hit that subscribe button or follow our channels. Don't just watch the drama unfold, learn from it, analyze it, and be prepared to turn insight into action.